Hello everyone. Tonight I invite you to sink into the kind of story that lingers like fog at the edge of your vision, to travel with me into the English countryside where the roads twist through dark forests and the air itself seems heavier, carrying with it centuries of whispers, and in that lonely landscape there stands Blackthorn Manor, a place the locals will not approach after dusk, a mansion wrapped in ivy and legend, its stone walls blackened by rain and time, its windows hollow and watching like the eyes of a skull. And though the villagers cross themselves when its name is spoken, there is always someone who does not listen, always someone who must prove that ghosts are nothing more than tales. And tonight's story belongs to one such man, Arthur Bellamy, a historian from London who had built his reputation on exposing myths and unraveling folklore with the tidy precision of fact, but facts are flimsy in the face of places like Blackthorn, where time refuses to move and where silence is not empty but alive. So it was on a storm, swept October evening that Arthur, lantern in hand and notebook tucked beneath his arm, arrived at the iron gates of the manor. Gates so rusted they groaned like dying beasts when pushed, and though he felt the bite of the wind and the shiver crawling his spine, he told himself it was nothing more than chill and imagination, and he pressed forward across the weed-choked path that led to the grand oak doors, which yielded under his touch with a sigh like something relieved to be disturbed, and stepping inside he was consumed by a darkness so thick it seemed to cling to him, the air damp and foul, every breath filled with the taste of mildew and something metallic like old blood, the lantern's weak flame casting trembling shadows across walls lined with portraits of long dead Blackthorn ancestors, their faces stern, their eyes gleaming as though wet with life, and Arthur laughed to himself at the foolishness of villagers who believed in curses. Yet when he turned away he could not shake the conviction that the painted eyes had followed, and so began his descent into the house that does not forgive, moving deeper into halls where carpets dissolved into mold beneath his boots, where wallpaper peeled in long curling strips like the skin of something rotting, where doors whispered open of their own accord, revealing rooms preserved as though waiting for occupants who would never come, a dining hall where a vast table stretched into the dark, still set for a meal abandoned a century ago, silver tarnished yet knives sharp as though freshly placed, chairs pulled back as though unseen guests had only just risen, and as he stepped closer the sound of a glass tumbling echoed across the chamber, though no hand had touched it, shattering against stone with such violence that he flinched, his heart thundering while the silence rushed back like a tide swallowing the sound, but he shook it off, muttering that it was only imbalance, only gravity, though the thought gave him no comfort, for gravity does not explain the way the broken shards arranged themselves into a crude pattern resembling an open eye, and still he pressed on, into drawing rooms where curtains stirred though the windows were nailed shut, into corridors where every footstep seemed doubled, as though someone else walked in tandem behind him, pausing when he paused, resuming when he resumed, until his nerves frayed and he spun on the empty stairwell, lantern raised high, whispering hello as though daring the air itself to answer, but the only reply was the slow settling of the house around him, timbers groaning, pipes sighing, or perhaps not pipes at all but something breathing deep in the walls. And in time he reached the library, the place villagers swore was the heart of the haunting, a cavernous chamber with shelves climbing so high into the shadows they vanished, books swollen with damp and time, the smell of paper and mold choking the air, but in the center upon a vast mahogany desk lay a book untouched by dust, its black leather gleaming faintly as though oiled, a quill resting beside it though no ink pot was visible, and with trembling fingers Arthur reached, the leather warm beneath his skin as though it had a pulse, and when he opened it the pages were filled not with stories or records, but with names, endless columns of names written in a hand that shifted from line to line, some jagged and hurried, some neat and deliberate, yet all strangely wet, the ink smearing across his fingers, though the names themselves did not blur. And as he turned the pages, he recognized dates beside each entry, dates spanning back centuries, and with horror he saw that many corresponded with disappearances recorded in local folklore, villagers who had vanished on stormy nights, travelers who had never reached their destinations, even priests and constables who had attempted to investigate, all memorialized in this one book, and though his rational mind screamed for explanation, some trick, some forgery, the lantern flickered and died, plunging him into a suffocating blackness, and in that void he heard the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping back across stone, deliberate, unhurried, as though someone else had risen from the table to greet him, followed by footsteps soft yet heavy, approaching from the dark, and then a whisper not spoken aloud but breathed directly into his skull, a whisper that drew out his name with aching slowness, Arthur, and the weight of it buckled his knees, for he realized the book was not a record but a hunger, not a memorial but a trap, and his arrival had been expected, his name the next to be written, and in panic he stumbled for the door, slamming into shelves that rattled with unseen force, books toppling though none struck him, the air filling with the flutter of 1,000 wings though there were no birds, only darkness alive and pressing, and he ran, crashing through corridors that seemed longer now, twisted, leading him not to the entrance but deeper into the belly of the house, where staircases turned back upon themselves and doors opened onto rooms that shifted each time he entered. A parlor, now a cellar now a nursery where a cradle rocked though no hand touched it, and the sound of a lullaby hummed by a voice cracked and ancient drifted from nowhere, and everywhere he turned he glimpsed movement at the edges of his vision, pale hands withdrawing behind doors, faces peering from cracked mirrors. His lantern rekindling for seconds at a time to show him flashes of things that should not be, children with hollow sockets for eyes, a woman hanging from the ceiling by strands of her own hair, a black hound with its jaw unhinged too wide, all watching, always watching, until at last he burst once more into the dining hall where the table was no longer set for mortals but for him, his place marked by the open book lying before a high-backed chair, and in that instant he understood that the house was not a place at all but a mouth, each room a tooth, each hallway a throat, and he was already swallowed, his fate sealed, yet he still screamed, clawing for the great oak doors that now would not budge, pounding his fists until blood smeared the wood, the portraits above him vibrating as though laughing, and the voices rose all around, the voices of hundreds who had come before, chanting his name until the sound became a roar that consumed him, and then silence again, silence so deep it seemed the world itself had ended, and when the villagers searched days later, they found no sign of Arthur Bellamy, only his notebook lying just beyond the gates, pages soaked with rain and ink blurred beyond legibility, yet if you stand at Blackthorn Manor on a cold October night, you may see him in the upstairs window, pale face pressed to the glass, mouth moving in silent screams, always watching, waiting, another soul devoured by the house that does not hunger for flesh, but for remembrance, for names, for eternity. And as the centuries pass and ivy swallows the walls, the book grows thicker, the whispers louder, for Blackthorn Manor is never sated. It waits still, it waits for you.